This is Extra Paycheck Podcast, episode number 106.
You're listening to Extra Paycheck Podcast, where you will learn how to build and grow your own successful online business. Now, here's your host, Alex Soul.
Welcome to yet another episode of the Extra Paycheck Podcast. This is episode number 106, and today's special guest is Charles Brun. He is a director and enterprise sales leader at Dynamic Yield. He founded MTL+Ecommerce, NYC+Ecommerce, Juliette Et Chocolat, and quite a few other things. So very interesting episode ahead of you. Enjoy today's show. Hi, Charles, and welcome to the Extra Paycheck Podcast.
Thanks. Hi. Very good to see you again, and glad to be here.
Charles, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what is that you do as your main project, main business at this very moment.
Sure, Alex. Basically right now what I do is I lead the sales team for a company called Dynamic Yield, mostly for the East Coast US and Canada. Really what this company does and the reason I joined and the reason I was so excited is because it's really one of the leading kind of tech companies in the personalization space. And when you think of personalization, I mean, it's a very kind of buzzword, cool, hip thing to hear, kind of like AI and machine learning. All these different concepts are obviously very, close and kind of tangential. I really got excited not because of the buzzword, but because I saw the product and because I saw the customers and because I saw also the results that those customers were getting. So I'll talk a little bit more maybe about personalization later, but yeah, that's what I'm currently doing.
Awesome. And Dynamic Yield, this is your project right now. This is what you're working at right now. But I know that your history as an entrepreneur goes quite way back, and I'd like you to share some of those stories. How did you get to the actual Dynamic Yield? What was your pathway in the entrepreneurship world?
Yeah, no, for sure, and you're right. I mean, I don't think the actual journey of entrepreneurs is a linear path, right? We all go through ups and downs and kind of interesting turns and struggles. So my first kind of segue into entrepreneurship was actually not necessarily in tech, which is an interesting kind of story. I'm actually originally from France, and I went to Canada to study. Essentially, when I started studying, my sister, who's like this big foodie, wanted to start something in the food industry, and she was really into chocolate. So we decided to start basically a chocolate brand. Because at the time, at least in Canada, there wasn't something similar to what you could find in France. So we started we opened a small restaurant in Montreal, and pretty quickly it actually started getting really popular with lines, every night out the door for 30 minutes wait, and people were just excited to get a hot chocolate or get some desserts and taste our really good pastries or chocolate. So started in that industry, and actually, from one restaurant we grew it to multiple locations. Now we have basically 9 locations. I scaled it to multiple locations and also launched actually a production facility or factory to basically centralize the production of all the pastries and chocolate. So that was my first foray into kind of entrepreneurship. And the truth is, even though it was working really well, the restaurant industry is a really tough industry. Profit margins are slim. We're talking about 4 to 6% profit margins and crazy hours and really a kind of tough customer service or customer experience side of it. So after 8.5 years or so into it, I wanted to do some other stuff. So I started progressively kind of dabbling into some other stuff. And one of my closest friends is a developer, and we'd been talking a long time about doing things together. And so we started dabbling into tech, and then onto some tech things. So basically started with that, and then moved into tech. in terms of what we started doing in tech, frankly, was the early days of there was Facebook. I guess what year was it back then? It was I guess 2000 and 2000 and I don't know, 9 or 10. That's when we started dabbling into some of these things and basically exploring things really without necessarily an idea to start off, more like seeing what sticks type of things. And eventually we started this company called NowInStore. And that actually, there were like a million iterations of that. And I don't know if I should go into that because it can go pretty deep. But the idea is, my background is obviously, I had this, retail experience and I was very interested in retail. I had also started, the e-com side of things for that retail chain. So really interested in thinking about how you can use technology to impact kind of the retail world. And when I say retail, I mean, I'm talking both kind of brick and mortar and also kind of digital, right? E-commerce. And so, just kind of testing a lot of different things in that space. And what happened is eventually one of the things that sticked, which was actually kind of paradoxical, was a lot of kind of small, what we found small e-commerce stores or sellers were looking to find a way to easily kind of send kind of print materials to their customers, and in many cases also to like wholesale buyers and things like that. And so we basically put together an app which was connected to Etsy and Shopify and a lot of other e-commerce platforms like that, and basically automatically kind of imported all the listings and then neatly put it together in a flyer or a catalog that you could either print and ship to your customers or to wholesalers. And so that's the second business that was started, kind of like random. And like I said, we really ended up going in that direction because we got some good kind of usage metrics, and we kind of just followed the money and followed the users, and it just kind of happened that way. So kind of a fun way to kind of pivot out of something that's pure retail into something that's a bit of a hybrid of like digital and offline marketing, basically.
That's very interesting. And are you still involved with these two previous businesses?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I'm still involved in the first one. I don't know if I actually even named it. So the business is called Juliette Et Chocolat. The website is juliettandchocolat.com. Juliette actually, Et Chocolat, because I guess it's in French.
Yeah.
Because, Quebec, and also, the French name kind of makes it original. And since we're from France, it's actually authentic. So juliettandchocolat.com. And so I'm still involved in that also, although not in a significant way, like, in any of the logistics or anything, but, we definitely still, talk on a quarterly basis about strategy, about the goals, about, the results and things like that. As for NowInStore, it's still running and I'm still involved with it in it. Same type of thing though. Like I'm not involved in the day to day, but really in a lot of the strategy and the kind of roadmap and long term strategy building, things like that. But it's fun because I think one of the things about tech that is different from retail is that it can change and continue to evolve much faster. And so, the team at NowInStore is basically continuing to test things out and continuing really to experiment with a lot of, the new developments that are happening in e-commerce. So, definitely a fun space.
Yeah. Right. So the first thing I would ask you here, Juliette and Chocolate, where are your locations? Where people could actually try that fine chocolate of yours?
Good question. So right now we're only in Canada, right? So, and actually when I say only in Canada, it's mostly in Montreal. So we're in Boisbriand, we're in Laval, we're in Montreal, we're in Longueuil, Brossard, those type of areas. Mm-hmm. Our flagship is actually really in the heart of Montreal and corner of like Prince Arthur and Saint Laurent. So that's one of the flagships. But really, there's a lot of really beautiful locations. Like one of the ones that I really like is Brossard in the 10-30. Obviously, beautiful kind of higher end, how would you call it, like promenade space where there's all these shops and stores. So it's, and if you actually take a look at the locations, like they're all really we really pay close attention to the detail and to the space we invest in, because we want it to be like really homey, really warm, and really like a place where you'd enjoy having, like, sipping a hot chocolate, especially when it's cold, So that's kind of the whole concept there.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Charles. So let's move on a little bit. There's another thing that you're a founder of, and it's called, well, there are basically two of them: MTL+Ecommerce and NYC+Ecommerce. Can you elaborate a little bit more on those projects and the reason why you started them, and, well, yeah, what they are?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good point. So, the truth is, like, because I'm really passionate about everything that's in the space of retail tech. I was always kind of looking into what was going on. What are the best practices people are adopting to grow their business, whether it's, online digitally or even offline through technology. And so, I found myself really kind of grabbing kind of coffees and beers with a lot of different people in the space and picking their brains a lot to understand what they were doing. And the truth is, eventually I thought to myself, like, we really need to create these like monthly events where we can bring these really brilliant people together to kind of, and also like bring like the rest of the community at large together to kind of share these interesting strategies and stories and talk about best practices, talk about what we've seen works and what doesn't work, and really try to grow the pie together. And so, yeah, I mean, basically, in terms of MTL+Ecommerce or MTL+Ecommerce, started that like close to like 5 years ago, I believe. And the whole concept was really, and it sounds kind of self-serving, but how do we learn as much as possible? And I was thinking, obviously, in terms of myself, I wanted to learn as much as possible with regards to anything going on in the digital marketing space, or, like I said, any type of technologies that can impact retail. And so started that. The first one was actually just in a bar, and we were like kind of unstructured, kind of like underground people that were doing Magento, that were doing the early things of Shopify, and there was probably like 30 people just kind of grabbing beer and just chatting e-commerce and technology. Mm-hmm. And so it was a huge success for like a first one with like minimal kind of promotion. And then the next one I said, okay, let's try to spice this up. Let's try to have somebody actually talk about a specific topic and really dive deeper into like some actual stuff that we're doing. And the second one, we had like 90 people. So we like tripled the number of attendees. And we had actually one of the kind of employee number, maybe like 5 or 6 or maybe 10 from Frank and Oak, do a talk about Frank and Oak. And Frank and Oak at that time was like really unknown, and it like basically kind of launched like a couple months prior to that. So it was a really interesting thing, and a lot of people, were really loved that talk because it was super genuine and dived into a lot of the struggles that they had and what they tested and what they were doing. So basically now it's still, going strong, as almost 5 years, since it's started. We have between 150 and 200 people that attend each of these events. And now we have basically 2 conferences, or like 2 kind of short presentations around the theme of, once again, retail and technology. And really try to bring like brands and retailers that are doing awesome stuff and that can kind of share some of their key learnings with the folks around them. So that's what it's about. It's really educational. It's about networking and learning with, your peers, and people from kind of different backgrounds, right? Because we have people that are, experts at PPC or SEO or, branding or design, and or people that are more on the ops level. And all these people come to MTL+Ecommerce, and they really get together and talk about all these different facets of retail and technology, and how new innovation is kind of changing this space. And so I think it's a really important event. And that's also why I kind of scaled it and brought it to New York when I moved here, because I think, even if New York is obviously a little bit further ahead in terms of retail and technology than Montreal, just because of its sheer size, there's so much room for kind of sharing these key insights. Now, the event actually in New York is different in that the scope of it and the size of it is very different, right? So whereas Montreal is kind of like these big conferences that are like, a lot of people are attending and it's kind of a more formal presentation with like a Q&A at the end. I wanted to try something different because what I noticed is that what you lose when it gets bigger is that kind of nuance or the insights that some of the brands and retailers can't share all the time. And sometimes it's because, it's a big brand and they just can't talk about some things that are kind of sensitive information.
Yeah.
So the idea is essentially, the idea was basically to start events which are actually much smaller, with people that are much more senior, right? So bringing in like VPs or CEOs of big e-commerce companies and having these exclusive dinners where there's like 10, 12 people around a table in a closed private dining space. And we still talk about pretty much exactly the same things. But I wanted to see if people are just, more open to sharing things than they are when they're on stage, basically. Because it's the same type of people that are presenting, but it's really, in this case, they're presenting to a much smaller committee of people. And the truth is that it is very different, right? Like they're going to talk about how much they're paying to acquire customers. They're going to talk about what are the campaigns that are performing the best. They're going to talk about what they're doing better than competitors, or what they wish they were doing, or what are their real struggles. And I think that's something that's interesting and that I wasn't able to always get at MTL e-commerce. Sometimes you do get that, right? Sometimes you do get that genuine kind of feedback. And also sometimes it's during the one-to-one conversations you have after, during the networking, not necessarily during the presentation. But during the dinners, you really have it much more because, like I said, it's like closed doors, 10 to 12 people. And so, you feel much more comfortable sharing that type of information, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I agree with you. And I also found that it's a lot easier to get more details, as you mentioned, after the actual conference by talking to that person. And I think one of the reasons is that they can't give out too much specific information simply because they don't know the level of the audience. They don't know where the audience is at, right? They can't go into some very specific PPC retargeting strategy because they assume that most people haven't tried retargeting at all, or even PPC. So they don't want to give too many details. They just want to give general idea so people start looking into it. I think that's one of those things, as you said, that you lose when this kind of conference grows, because they simply don't have time to go through all these little details and very in-depth information.
Yeah, so I think that's totally right. I think that's a really good point, and that's something that obviously when you have 12 people around the table, who's there, and they're all pretty senior, so we all speak the same language and we're at the same level, more or less. I would say though that there's also a level of, I would say, almost like paranoia sometimes with some verticals. I'll give you an example. Like I've noticed that the brands that are in the really high end kind of luxury market, they are very, very, I'll say, secretive about any of their strategies, any of their metrics, any of the things that they do. And so we've had like a lot of great brands refuse to come present at MTL e-commerce, mainly because they said that they didn't want other competitors to know what they were doing. When I have those similar brands that are in a closed settings, and once again, I also sometimes have to be careful that I don't have necessarily competitors that are attending the same dinner. But when I have these in a smaller setting and there's no competitors, they kind of open up a little bit more. They don't start disclosing everything. because I'm telling you, those verticals the people are a little bit paranoid, but they open up a little bit more. So I think the setting is also something that kind of changes the framework of this whole, or maybe not I want to say the mental framework that the attendees kind of have, basically.
Yeah, totally. And, it makes sense. In my case, I hang out more with that affiliate marketing crowd where we make our little niche websites and make money off of that. And sometimes you come across people who built one single website and they're making a killing with it. And they admit that for some reason, they don't even have competitors, right? They tell you, we stumble upon this niche that there's like so much demand and nobody's promoting these products. And, you could only assume that they will not tell you what that product or what that niche is. Of course, they don't want everyone, listening to this podcast or reading their blogs, whatever, just jumping and replicating that exact same website. And, then boom, all of a sudden you have hundreds, if not thousands of people promoting the same exact niche. It only makes sense to be protective of, certain things in your business.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It kind of reminds me of the book, and I don't know if you've talked about this on your podcast already, but the book 0 to 1, where one of the things he talks about is like secrets and the importance of really, keeping certain secrets. And so I think that's true. I mean, I think secrets, don't last very long, and people catch on to things fairly quickly, I find. But yeah, I think to your point, there are, niches where you can make, a good kind of, or build a good lifestyle business, and where there aren't many players that are trying and doing what you're doing. And if there were, then obviously the pie would be sliced in, much more pieces than if you're alone. So, I think it's a really good point. And I think that's why people are fearful. I would say though, that in industries like luxury, one of the reasons I believe where they're more fearful is because a lot of it is also about like what you're doing and like if you're releasing a new collection and if you have a new completely new design and a new pattern that you're releasing and people know it before it's actually live, I think it can, your competitors can significantly hinder you in a way. If they release it before you or things like that, I think they get a little bit paranoid about these type of things because that's what it's really all about. Whereas, I feel like in other industries, it's not just about the strategies. It's about much more than that and how well you execute a lot of the things. So yeah, I think it's a mix of all those different reasons, basically.
Yeah, totally. All right, Charles. So I want to move on to dynamic yield. The company has worked with some pretty big brands and very well-known, world-renowned brands. But we haven't yet talked about what exactly dynamic yield is, what it does, and why people would work with you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So dynamic yield, like I said, it's basically it's a company that we call it unified customer engagement, and I think it sounds a little bit like I want to say pompous marketing term. The idea is we're a personalization OS, which means that we are at the heart of a lot of other of an ecosystem to personalize every different touch point of that ecosystem, right? So you mentioned we have a lot of big customers. We do, and we're lucky to have brands like Under Armour or Sephora or J.Crew or Anthropologie or Urban Outfitters. All these amazing brands that are using our technology to essentially personalize that visitor journey, so that when a visitor is actually coming in on your site or opening your app or opening an email, the content and the experience will really be tailored to that customer's affinities, right? So what depending on what the visitor or the customer actually purchased or browsed or viewed or clicked, what type of websites he browsed even before coming onto your site is going to determine what you actually show that customer. Mm-hmm. So at the intersect of personalization, really there's big data, because obviously you need a lot of data to be able to understand the patterns of customer behavior and their affinities. So that's one key aspect. There's also machine learning, and obviously that's another buzzword. And the idea is, how do you make sense of that data and really present and predict what is going to be appealing for that visitor in order to increase the yield of that visit, essentially. So, the typical example is a customer's coming in and he's landing on your homepage. What do you show that given customer at that given point in time in order to maximize the yield of that visit? So if the visitor is interested in, I don't know, you're selling maybe, shoes. What, should you be showing, first of all, men's shoes, women's shoes? Should you be showing, do you know if this person's like an athletic, or is, she more of, a stay-at-home mom, that, really doesn't care about the look of her shoes? Like, there's obviously these different kind of personas, right? And so the question is, what do you show that specific visitor? Like, do you show that specific visitor a banner of like a person like running with these awesome running shoes, or is it more like shoes that are comfortable and for the everyday mom? And then within the products that you recommend, which type of products you recommend, and in terms of the actual copy, what is the copy that appeals to that specific visitor? And if you're kind of triggering specific messages or promotions or prices, what are those prices, right? So there's a million things that come into play when you think about personalization. And, obviously it can get down to really granular levels. And it can also sound creepy. And I remember when I did a presentation at MTL+Ecommerce, somebody said, well, doesn't this get creepy? Like when there's, you're basically making that site a little bit too personal. And in some cases, some of our customers, I will say that they don't want to show that they know as much as they do, and they just want to keep it, fairly kind of loose. Like, okay, we know you're a man, so we'll show you like some men's creatives, but we also, we don't necessarily want to show you like, swimwear, because we know that you love swimming, but let's just keep it to men's sportswear. Let's just keep it at that. Otherwise, it might be too creepy.
Yeah.
So there is that kind of use case, but I think overall the idea is, and we're really going towards a world where we want to get to the thing that matters most as fast as possible. So that's point number one. And how do we do that? Well, you show the most relevant experience to that visitor. You show things that are contextual. And something that I mentioned also, I think when we last met, is like, if you're going out on a date with somebody, and on the third date that person is still asking you where you come from, and what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, and where did you go to high school, like, and you answered that already twice, like it's offensive, right? And so the idea is, if a visitor is coming on your site for the third time and he's seeing the same things, and you already know that he doesn't buy sandals, he's not interested in like hats, or whatever you may be selling, you want to hone into those specific things that he showed interest in, like, because that's showing that you pay attention. And if it's something about different collections and different copy and creatives, you want to show that things are evolving. There's this journey that you want to take him through, and he's now well aware of your brand, and you appreciate that, and you want to show him the next level of your brand. You don't want to show him just what the newbie and the first guy sees when he comes on your site, but you want him to experience it on another level, basically. So, I mean, I guess that's a very kind of long answer. The short answer is, what we do is basically personalize the journey of customers across different touch points, and we do that across through a lot of different ways. So that's in a broad way what we do at Dynamic Yield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. And on the subject of personal kind of advertising, let's say, and stuff like that, and being creepy once again. And in my opinion, as a customer, right? So I use ad blocker for most websites because I don't want to see ads, because I don't think they're implemented properly, right? Sure. I do, however, have it disabled on YouTube and on Facebook for a simple reason, because I'm a marketer and I want to see how people target me, what they're doing, basic things like that. I'm interested. And once again, as a customer who, let's say, doesn't use ad blocker at all, I prefer seeing ads that I could actually relate to. I prefer to learn about products and industries that I'm, potentially interested in, rather than seeing, I don't know, like ads for baby clothes or for some kind of courses or training that, I would never be interested in.
Sure.
I know that in any case, I am going to see ads. They'll force them on me. So personally, I'd rather see something that I want.
No, I completely agree. And I think that's what it's all about. I think it's about relevancy and making sure that, in the end you see things that are relevant. And I completely agree. Like sometimes I see ads and I'm like, why am I being targeted this like, I don't know, fluorescent nail polish? Like I'm never going to buy this shit. Like, why are you showing me this? And I get frustrated when it's not relevant to me. Whereas I've actually bought quite a few times, on sites that I've heard the first time through a Facebook ad. Like I just, there's like these things. I think one of them was like, I forget the name of the site, but it's something like A Touch of Modern, but it's like another variation of it. And there was like an ad on Facebook. Mm-hmm. There's like this cool gadget, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And boom, 3 clicks, I buy it, and I try to, like, if I don't like it, I'll just return it. And I do it because I also want to give like startups a chance. And we're in this space, and I feel like we have to be, we have to eat our own dog food and like show that we're all willing to try things, even though I've never heard of a brand before. And I see myself doing it more and more. And so I love getting ads in Facebook that are really relevant to what I'm interested in. And like I said, a lot of the times it's going to be like, tech gadgets or sometimes like apparel that's cool and like from like cool brands that are kind of up and coming. And I'm super, super interested in getting those.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And another thing that that whole explanation of personalization, what's really interesting that many years ago when websites started, nobody cared about anything really. Well, I have a website, that's good enough, right? So about, 10 years ago, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, we started looking into targeting our clients properly. And now most of the people that run websites or they're working in marketing departments, a lot of them know that you only have these few seconds to grab your client's attention. Otherwise, they'll just leave your site and move on to the next site. However, most of the time, what we're doing guessing work, or we're doing some basic, tracking and trying to figure out, okay, so when I did this update on my website, that many people started leaving faster. But I have another number of people that started clicking on my buy link or subscribe link, whatever that is. So that's all good. But it's mostly guessing work, and that's most of us, that's what we're doing mostly,
Yeah.
But what you guys are doing is actually quite further than that. That's the next step. You don't guess anymore. Right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point. I think in terms of, I'll start where you actually started as well. I think one of the reasons why personalization is becoming really important these days is because we're almost in a perfect market in terms of ad spend and how you can like tweak things to get the best traffic or acquire it at the cheapest rate. And so really the best thing you need to do next is optimize the post-click experience. So what do you do when the visitor clicks on that ad and is on your site? You know that you've spent already X amount of dollars to bring them on your site, and you really want to make sure that you maximize, first of all, that you maximize conversions and that you maximize the average order value. And so that's why I think, we're at this, crucial point where personalization is finally becoming like, almost like table stakes, because if you don't have it, then you're just not going to survive. And we're not exactly there yet. I think when you have personalization, you're innovative. But I think in 5 years, like it'll really be a situation where if you don't have it, you're not going to survive. So that's kind of the context in terms of personalization. And I think to your point, personalization is completely tied to testing and optimization. And so with dynamic yield, like the platform itself is, basically a platform that allows you to not only just, send a visitor that's interested in a specific type of product, show him those products, but also decide what to show that product at a given point in time, right? So if it, to your point, if there are, let's say 5 different banners that are being served on your homepage, and that visitor, for example, is in a place where, let's say, the weather is I don't know, it's 25 degrees Celsius, or I don't know how much that is in Fahrenheit, like 75 or something Fahrenheit, and then you want to target, the engine is going to know to target the specific banner basically where, instead of having people that are, I don't know, running outside, with a hoodie and a running suit. Instead, it's going to be people that are on the beach, and you're going to be displaying your, I don't know, maybe your bathing suits and stuff. That's how powerful it gets. You're starting to have a situation where the engine kind of automatically understands what to show based on the different context of the visitor, and based on where that visitor is coming in from. Now, there is still some manual work to be done because you have to set up those banners. You have to be able to create some kind of hierarchy in terms of what do you think is most important for you. But basically, once you set that up, the engine runs on its own basically, and starts kind of automatically optimizing what to serve in order to make sure you basically maximize the yield of that journey, and really not just the journey, but the LTV, right? How do you maximize the lifetime value of that customer, so that when he or she comes back to your site, she's going to keep on buying, and that average order value is going to be as high as possible, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. And as you said, I think this is where the industry is going. Don't really have a choice. Yeah, and Charles, exactly. So you work with big brands, and I'm pretty sure that you're charging an interesting amounts of money, let's say, for this kind of work. And there are a lot of smaller companies or startups that don't have money, or just entrepreneurs that are launching their e-commerce store where they're selling some homemade items, but they're kind of tech savvy a little bit, and they're trying to optimize all of that. They can't afford hiring anyone really to help them out. Do you have any tips on how these smaller companies and brands could get into personalization, or at least try to get into it without hiring a big company?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question, and so I will say that we do work with huge brands, but we also have smaller ones. So we charge mostly based on monthly unique visitors, and so depending on the volume of monthly unique visitors you have, the price will not be the same. So from that perspective, let's say an Under Armour's paying much more than some of our really small brands that are in the space. But to your point about how you can do this even if you're tiny, I think really step number one is almost like A/B testing. So for example, kind of looking at your visitors, and you can do that. I mean, depending on the platform you have, depending on if you have a CRM or anything, you kind of look at the data. Maybe even just like looking at the people that purchase, like who are your customers? What do they look like? And if you're not collecting information like demographic or psychographic information, you should be, or like even things like I said, like age. How old are your visitors? If you were to bucket them into 5 different segments, what is there like a main gender, and kind of like understanding and segmenting your traffic, your visitors would be the first step. And then based on that, I would definitely encourage you to basically A/B test a lot of different things. Like if you know that, once again, if you know that most of your visitors are actually female, then it might make more sense to have mostly female creatives, but A/B test different creatives for females, because that's something that you should be continuously doing. Beyond that, really, it's hard to do a lot of the things that we're doing, like that are technology and like allows you to do, because you just need to have that. You need to have that technology, right, to be able to capture data and essentially segment it, and then target specific experiences to specific visitors, and have the engine kind of at scale optimize the experience, is obviously something that can't be really done without the software. But like I said, step number one is really kind of looking at your own data and analyzing your traffic and segmenting it into different buckets. And then A/B testing different things, whether it's, creatives, whether it's different copy, whether it's different, site layouts, and seeing which ones perform best. And really taking it one step at a time, really like thinking of maybe testing or A/B testing, maybe the homepage, A/B testing the category page, A/B testing the PDP or a product detail page, A/B testing the cart page, really doing it across those like main pages, I think is something that is already going to occupy a lot of your time. And then once you've done that, you can take it to the next level and say, okay, I'm going to start using some technologies like dynamic yield and seeing all the potential that there is there, essentially.
All right, thanks for sharing that. And Charles, one of the last questions here for the show: what would be your main advice? The most important thing that you think beginner entrepreneurs should really pay attention to if they want to succeed, of course.
It's such a tricky and tough question. The most important thing they should pay attention to, I think, the truth is, and this is maybe a bit of a biased question, but really you should start testing and start doing things as fast as possible, and basically if you have something you really want to do, test it out in the real world as fast as possible. And there's always this saying that I forget his name, the founder of LinkedIn. I have a complete blank. Hoffman, Reid Hoffman. The founder of LinkedIn says, if you're not embarrassed by your product when you release it, then you've basically shipped it too late, or you've waited too long. And I think that's really kind of the mindset you have to have. I think you have to kind of throw something out there and get it kind of tested in the real world, and then iterate and improve it. Because really what we have is, we all have this fear of failing. We all have this fear of doing something shitty. But the problem is that's kind of a paralyzing fear. So I guess my advice is really trying different things out, and really making a lot of bets, right? Because anytime you try something, you're making a bet. And the more bets you make in life, the more likely you are to win bets. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is really to, try and test continuously. Don't be afraid to be bold and launch something and get it to a point where it's in the hands of some potential customers or actual customers, and then just kind of iterate based on that, basically.
Great advice, Charles. And I think this doesn't apply only to like entrepreneurship. This applies to so much more in life. People that want to write a book, people that want to launch a hobby website that isn't even monetized, or a YouTube channel, or, start a new career. The longer you think about it and analyze it, I think the less chance of you succeeding is, because as you just mentioned, if you launch something or you do something at the point where you think it's perfect, it's because you really took way too long to do it, and you missed out on months, if not years of your life, where you could have been already testing it and, probably making a living out of it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will say one thing though, and that's something that I've learned also, is that doesn't mean you don't have to plan or prepare. And by that, I mean, if you have an idea that you think is great, you should definitely test it as soon as possible. But also I'm really a big believer that you have to think of some kind of revenue stream or revenue model to make it work. So you want to crunch some basic numbers. You want to do some back of the envelope type of calculations to see, is it feasible, and how much revenue could I make at its best potential kind of in its best potential form or shape. even if once again the end product might be completely different, but at least the idea that you have at like the inception should have some kind of backing in terms of what makes sense financially to see if it works or not. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm not sure if I was clear there, but
yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that, Charles. And for people that want to find out more about you, maybe get in touch with you or find out more about Dynamic Yield, where should they go?
Good question. I feel like I should update my. I used to have a website, but I stopped updating it. So, well, if they want to reach me, they can always reach me at. Actually, I'll give them my NYC e-commerce, charles@nycecommerce.com. That's my personal email. I'd be happy to answer them there. They can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Charles Brun. And as for Dynamic Yield, basically dynamicyield.com. Check us out if you want to learn more about personalization. And I'm always happy to, answer your emails via email at charles@nycecommerce.com or even charles@dynamicyield.com. You can reach me at any time.
Awesome. Thanks for that, man. Charles, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your insights, your tips, and thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me over. It's a really awesome show, and best of luck to you, man.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Extra Paycheck Podcast. As always, I'll be putting up a show notes page at extrapodcast.com/106. This is where I'll be sharing links and other resources mentioned in today's episode. Also, head over to extrapodcast.com/iTunes in order to subscribe to the show through iTunes. If you haven't already, please do leave a rating and a review, which will help the show tremendously. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next Monday.